Hello, everyone, and here we are again doing the same thing that we always do. Maybe what we are trying to do is quite Herculean, quite majestic, quite difficult, that we have to come again every week to discuss more and more about it. So, today I would like to take forward in the direction after what we discussed in the last week's video of keeping things simple and understanding where we stand, what is our actual situation, and not to over-imagine things in the sense that just because I know about some great book, it means I'm going to end up understanding it. And there is no shame in it. You like to recognize where you stand is actually a very, very nice thing. It's a very honest thing that you understand where you stand regarding your understanding. So today I would like to go back to the basics, and I would like to go back to a very important basic. And the wind is pretty strong, and I do not know if the video will have a lot of disturbance, even though I have a wind protection on my microphone, but still maybe it would still pick up some wind. Let's see. The thing I want to discuss with you today is what is the importance, significance of understanding the danger of a limited perception. Okay? A limited perception. Let me clarify what I mean by those two words. Limited means which is bound by a limit, as the word suggests, which is not free, which has a boundary, which has a limit. Perception means an observation, like to observe something in a limited way. That's what I call a limited perception. Now, I would like to open this up a little bit more, because in what way perception is limited, how do we know if the perception is limited? Maybe a lot of questions rise from there straight away. So basically, evolution has given us these senses. Okay, we have the five good senses. You can call the mind as the sixth additional sense, not the magical sixth sense, no, just as an extra sense, the mind, which could be considered as a sense organ. And as evolution took place, the organism became complex. Okay? The complexity was achieved on the basis of storing information. Okay? From life's point of view, you can call that evolution. The important information was passed on to the next generation. The useless information was thrown away or not passed on to the next generation. And that information kept on improving over the period of time, whatever is the length of evolution on the planet. And then the end result is how we are today, how our senses are today. So our senses store a tremendous amount of background information, which is the result of the evolution that they have gone through. So the kind of world that is created around you by your senses, and it could be any sense, your vision, hearing, touch, all of that is basically based on the information the senses have gathered over the years in evolution. Okay? Now, the purpose of the sense is not to tell you the truth. Okay? I would repeat it again. The purpose of our senses is not to tell us what is the truth, what is reality. That's not the purpose of the sense. The purpose of the senses is to detect a change. Senses are detecting change. They cannot detect something that does not change. Okay? So everything you see, the reason you're seeing it is because at some level there is some kind of a change which is happening that our eyes can detect, and on basis of that change our eyes are able to create a picture around us that this is how the world looks. The same is true for your ears, and the same is for the other senses. Okay? So the senses already have this background information based on evolution, which we can call a baseline, for example. A background information, a baseline, and in respect to that baseline, the senses calculate everything. Okay? All the changes that come to the senses use the baseline information and then calculate everything else. Based on that calculation, the perception of the world is created, whether it's an audio perception or a visual perception, whatever kind of whatever comes in front of you. So the senses are heavily dependent on the background information, and the senses always detect a change. Actually, any instrument in the world can only detect change. All your microscopes, your telescopes, anything, your Large Hadron Collider, anything, they all have a baseline, and in respect to that baseline they calculate the fluctuations up and down, whatever, and then we try to explain phenomenon on based of those fluctuations, whether up and down. That's the basis of any instrument. That's why every instrument has a error percentage, which is like what is the amount of error the instrument itself is doing to give you the final answer. So our eyes and our senses also have this error percentage, but maybe because the evolution is such a long time that that error percentage has been reduced to a very small fraction. So the eyes give us a precise estimate of change around us. They detect change. The eyes do not care about the philosophical question of the truth. Okay? But we as human beings do care about that question. Why do we care about that question? Is because since a human is born, there is a very important factor present in our lives, and that is the feeling of sorrow, pain. And no human wants to be in pain, whether it's a human or an animal. Okay? No living organism likes to be in the state of sorrow. And the whole point of meditation and religion, at least the very, very old, not the younger religions like Christianity and other recent 2,000 and 2,500, we are not talking about these religions, but much, much older religions. And there, the definition of religion was actually defined in the sense that there should be freedom from sorrow. And the same was actually rephrased by Buddha 500 years before Christ, when he was teaching that the life is sorrow and it's possible to be free of sorrow. So freedom from sorrow is the essence of all meditation. Now, how does this information that I gave you about the senses, that the senses have a baseline, and that baseline is from where they calculate everything. How does this connect to sorrow? Okay, which is the central aspect of our channel as well. All the talk about all these topics is just the one central aspect is freedom from sorrow. So, freedom from sorrow comes by learning. Okay, you are born and then you discover that there is sorrow. And then, just like any other scientist, you investigate why there is sorrow. And then you ask the question, is there a possibility of freedom from sorrow? Because I don't like sorrow. It's very uncomfortable. But to give an answer to that humongous question, that big question, that is it possible to be free from sorrow, we have to investigate sorrow. We have to learn about things. We have to learn about our daily life. We have to learn how sorrow is born. And for that, we have to observe. We have to perceive. We have to collect data, if I call from a scientific point of view. You have to collect data about everyday life to see how sorrow is born. Okay? Now, the only way for me to collect data is through my senses. I can see how I behave, I can hear how I talk, okay? I can feel how my touch is for others. Am I a harsh person slapping someone, or am I a soft person trying to help someone? Touch can be used both ways. So that is, my five senses and my mind are the only things I have that I can use to observe my daily life. And why am I observing my daily life? Because I want to be free from sorrow. Very simple. We are not making it too complex. And because my observation of the daily life depends on my senses, I have to take into account the nature of my senses. Okay? Because my senses are based on information or based on evolution, maybe this word you feel more than information. Because my senses are based on evolution, they work based on what they have learned through the evolution. Their action is limited. And I defined the word limited as well in the beginning. In what sense the action is limited? They only act in the field of what they know. They can only detect what they already know. If there is something that for which the senses don't have a baseline information, then this thing they cannot detect. Okay? There are many different kinds of radiations or forms of light. We have X-rays, we have gamma rays, we have different kinds of spectrum. Now, for each spectrum, you could have a specific camera which is just an expert of that spectrum. But if you have a camera which can only see a specific spectrum, now according to that camera, the other spectrum doesn't exist, because the baseline of that camera is to detect just one spectrum. In the same way, our eyes are also designed for a specific spectrum. And why the evolution chose that spectrum? Because of survival of the fittest, basically. That the essence of having senses is to understand the environment. Why? So you can protect yourself and you can feed yourself. You have to find food, you have to hunt, whatever. So, because the senses are based on limited information which is gathered from evolution, the senses are unable to observe something new. That's the whole actually point where we are coming now. So, I want to be free from sorrow, but when I go to observe my life using my senses, which are the only thing I have, I face the challenge that they are collecting data in the same way every day. So, they don't care if a change has happened which is outside their limit. Okay? For example, let's take an example that I'm conditioned to be of a specific nation. Okay? Nation A. I belong to nation A. Now, two people are fighting, and I observe that incident, and I'm also observing myself, that how I behave during that incident. I hope I am doing that. Then I see that I recognize that one of the person is from my country. Okay? And when the perception of that person happens and I recognize he's from my country, if I'm not aware to the functioning of my senses, of my eyes, then I would not be aware of the corruption that would enter my observation. I would start preferring the person of my country, my family, my tribe, something that I love, something that I prefer. Okay? I start giving them preferences, and my observation also starts to give them preferences. And in this sense, my observation starts molding itself according to my priority. Now, I'm not observing what is actually going on, but I'm actually observing what I want to observe, which is what happens in political debates all the time. These politicians never reach a conclusion because, first of all, they are all officially cheat. They have no moral values or anything. Money is the whole point with them. And they have this strong conditioning about power, that I need to have the power. And for that, they don't see that why they are not able to come to a conclusion when they sit on the table to discuss something. Even though if the topic is very simple, that common person would think, we can solve it quite easily. So, because there is a corruption in your mind, in your conditioning, in your baseline, through which you're observing, your observation starts getting affected by it. And then when you observe, every day your observation is getting affected by that thing, and you stop to feel that you are getting corrupted in a way. The end result is you stop learning from that because you are always observing from the same point of view. So if I am too nationalistic, I cannot learn about nationalism because my perception is already defined that this is how I am supposed to look when it comes to the country. And because I always look in that way, I never learn something new from that. And this is applied to all the other senses: hearing, speaking, touch, whatever. So, when I go to the world to learn why I am developing sorrow, I fall in the trap that I keep on observing from the same background information, from the same baseline, from the same conditioning, which leads to a blockage in my learning. That I don't learn. I collect information according to the same factors every day. So, in a way, I gather information, but there is no new learning. So, I could write a book about all this, where I would have information from all my experiences, where I have observed how I was trying to learn about sorrow. But because my observation was always limited according to that baseline, actually I end up with just information but not fruitful learning. Okay? As in science we say, there is no big idea there. There is only a lot of big information, a lot of thick book that you can prepare from it, from those memories, but it doesn't really push you forward in learning about sorrow. And this is one of the central factors for a lot of people to not make progress. Okay? we are using the word progress here not in the sense of gathering. When my room is dirty, then cleaning the room is progress. And while cleaning, I might end up throwing some stuff out. So, when I'm using the word progress, I do not mean progress as money or to gather something. Progress in cleaning my perception, in cleaning my senses. And because I don't clean my senses, because I don't observe this loop of the sense, that the sense is stuck in this loop of whatever it knows, it only observes according to that. I never learn anything new. I learn a lot of information for sure, but there is no fresh, how do you say? There's no fresh learning, okay? There is no deep penetrative perception that affects all of you, that affects your whole way of living. And because of that, we actually do not learn about sorrow. We know loads of information about sorrow. If I ask any common person, tell me about sorrow, he will say, yes, sorrow happens when we lose someone, blah, blah, blah. This is how time heals and this, and he will give hundreds of explanations about sorrow. But actually, he is not free of sorrow. And the reason is, there is no actual learning about sorrow when you are stuck in the loop of limited perception. This is what I was calling the danger of limited perception. That you spend your whole life without learning anything. And again, for some people, learning is to collect information. That is not the learning we are talking about. We are talking about the learning where you actually learn something totally new that you never knew before. Okay? Now, that happens from a different quality. All this talk till now was to make you see that the senses are limited. Okay? How do I observe something which is totally new in the sense which is beyond the limit of what my senses can actually perceive, or which is beyond the illusion which my conditioning or my baseline has created? My baseline has created an image of the world around me. He's good, he's bad, he's this, he's that, and blah, blah, blah. If I always look through that, I would not learn something new. To learn something new, I would have to go beyond it. And some people would say beyond it means to increase the limit of my circle. Before my senses were this limited, I learned more information, now they are this limited. This is not what we are saying. Even with more information, with a larger circle, bigger circle, the variety might be a little bit better. You might have a little bit more colorful profile of your limit, but still it's a limited perception. So we are talking about a perception that is free. A free perception leads to actual new learning. Now, straight away the question arises, how do we have this free perception and everything? Maybe we take it in the next videos. We already have 23 minutes and I like to keep the videos short. Otherwise, it's too much to take in. But the whole essence of what I'm trying to say is that your senses are based on limited evolutionary information. And they will always be limited by that. On top of that, you put on your societal conditioning on them. All of that information creates a perception of the world around you. And if you always observe from that perception, then it will be very hard for you to learn something new. Or it would be very hard for you to touch meditation. We are not saying you will not be able to have experiences. Meditation is not to have experience, remember. The point is to be free from sorrow. The point is freedom. Like Buddha said, nirvana. Okay? Or the Upanishads say moksha. So, the point is freedom. And with a limited perception, there is never going to be freedom. There might be more information, there might be more colors, there might be more experiences, but there will not be freedom. So, I hope I was able to point out a few things. Maybe we continue this in the next video as well. And if you have some questions regarding the first part here, then it would be nice that you ask it during this week, and I can join those questions and maybe some more things that I would see which are important that we can discover about this whole limited perception. Because most people are interested that, hey, tell us about freedom, tell us about enlightenment, tell us about the highest principle, highest, biggest truth and everything. But the whole point is that even if someone tells you, you might not be ready to receive it. So recently, I said it in my last video as well, and I would say it again, that when you run behind something which is too big for you to grasp, you are actually avoiding what you actually can do right now. Okay? When you are running behind something very difficult, which you cannot do, you are avoiding what can be done right now, which is a little simpler than that, but it can be done. So, do what is possible, do what's in your hands first, and then think about bigger things. Observing your limited perception is in your hands. So, observe that. Observe that. And then slowly, some possibility of freedom will also open. So, enjoy the weekend, and let's meet again next week.